Outputting our coverage. It's what we do.
That's all we do every Thursday
At 5:30.
College football.
Mountain West Conference.
Doesn't matter.
SEC
Is all that matters.
Nick Saban
Is crazy.
Yeah.
And that's all. Let's start the show.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in once again to the Outputting Our Coverage show. Now consistently inconsistent with our broadcast day and time. Just when football season's not in full swing, the rest of the world just does not understand how important it is that we still talk about football.
That's right, and apparently inmates in Georgia can't keep from murdering each other. So
yeah, I think that's all you're legally allowed to say.
that's it. That's all I can say.
David's security clearance very high. Yes, lots of scary things going on. David, really our white knight, trying to prevent prison murders.
I do what I can.
Yeah, most of you out there are wondering what the heck we're talking about, and we're not going to tell you any more about it because we're going to jump right in to talking about the other kind of football, the Super Bowl. It is happening not this Sunday, but the next.
That's right.
For you diehard college football fans who have trouble keeping up with the day, I understand. We know the teams now.
We do.
49ers and the Ravens.
Which I believe was predicted on this show last week.
I think so. I think we both said that we were kind of, I don't know if we were rooting or expecting or where exactly we fell on the spectrum, but we were siding with the 49ers.
I was hoping for a Harbaugh Bowl.
Yes.
I thought that would be an interesting storyline, and we got it.
We got it. Interesting fact, did you know that the coaches of these two teams are brothers?
They are, actually.
Did you know that?
I did know that.
I have not seen that mentioned much.
Really?
On the
internet
or anywhere.
not even a little bit. It's like a buried story.
It's really kind of an intriguing element to this game, if you will. Just general thoughts on the game. A lot of times you watch the Super Bowl, it ends up just being a blowout or not a very good game. Do we get a really competitive game here, at least?
We have potential to. If both teams play like they've been playing in the last 3 or 4 weeks, San Francisco has been the more complete team, the better team for longer. They were pretty good. Even before Kaepernick came in, they were okay. They were very good with Kaepernick since about week 9. They've just been really stout, really consistent all the way throughout. Baltimore, a little shaky in the middle of the season. They had a little bit of a blow-up within the locker room, fired their offensive coordinator. But in the playoffs, they've been really good. And a lot of people don't know, going into the playoffs, they completely reshuffled their offensive line. They moved Michael Orr back to his natural position at right tackle, slid the right tackle down to right guard. They just moved everybody. They got a left tackle off the bench to start the playoffs. Very unorthodox, but their offense has been pretty good. Joe Flacco's got 8 touchdowns to no interceptions, which always helps. And that aging defense has stepped up when it's mattered.
So what happened in the Falcons game with the 49ers this past weekend? I did not watch it closely. I saw the Falcons were up big in the first half, kind of similar to what had happened in their game the week before, I think.
It was.
And then a second half, just a collapse of sorts, or was it more the 49ers getting things together? And should that be a concern for the 49ers in the Super Bowl?
I don't think so. I think the week before, Atlanta really showed their hand. I think Atlanta has a problem of getting too hype. It's actually a pretty common problem. Everybody gives it 120% in the first 2 quarters and have nothing left in the tank in the third and fourth. But I think even more than that, more than Atlanta breaking down, what you saw was the 49ers and their ability to adjust their game plan. Throughout the year, they've been pretty good at that. First and second quarters, it's a close game. They're right in there, and then they break away in the third and fourth. And it's a couple things. It's manipulating their game plan, making adjustments, but it's also their conditioning and their style of play. They have a huge offensive line, and they just love to run over people, and that wears on you throughout a game. And I'm really interested to see what it does on this pretty old Ravens defense.
Including an ageless star who has finally announced this will be his last year in the NFL, Ray Lewis. We want to play a little soundbite for you, right? It's more than a soundbite. It's would you call it an inspirational speech?
I think everything he does is an inspirational speech. He has that kind of tone and tone of a pastor.
Yeah.
And we're going to let this roll. We might give some comments here and there. So our first attempt, just forgive us if it doesn't sound good.
I talked to my team today, and I talked to them about life, life in general. And everything that starts has an end.
Good point.
Just like,
Indeed.
and for me, today, I told my team that this will be my last ride. And I told them I just felt so much peace in where I am with my decision
So much peace.
because of everything that I've done in this league. I've done it. I've done it, man.
He's done it.
He's done everything.
He's done
An
it.
accolade that I don't have individually, but I've never played the game for individual stats.
Hang on, we've got to pause it right there. There's not an accolade that he has that he doesn't have individually. So he has an NFL MVP, wrong. He has a passing record, wrong. He's been a receiver, wrong. He doesn't have the most tackles as a linebacker. He's not even considered one of the greatest linebackers.
He killed someone.
Allegedly. All right,
Does that
let me
count?
keep going.
I'm just curious.
To make my team be a better team, and now God is calling. God is calling in so
Did he
many
say
other
colon?
areas of life, and my children. My children have made the ultimate sacrifice.
And what sacrifice is that?
The ultimate.
Being his children.
For 17 years.
Yes.
And whether it's jump on a plane, jump right back, go to school, and I don't want to see them do that no more. I've done.
He's
what
waited
I want to
17
do in this
years
business.
for that, but
Now it's my turn. It's my turn to give them back something.
oh no.
Hey, YouTube.
So apparently this was this guy's reaction on his speech, but he had a pretty similar idea. Apparently it's popular. So anyway, I think Ray Lewis just a little full of himself. Apparently Wes Welker's wife was a little upset by it too. Did you see the tweet she had after the game?
All right, first of all, I think we have to tell people who Wes Welker is, just in case they don't know.
Okay, Wes Welker, the number one receiver for the Patriots.
For a long time.
Long
He's
time.
been Brady's go-to guy for a while.
Former Texas Tech wide receiver, kind of. I don't think he even went drafted. I think he kind of snuck in after the draft.
Kind of like Tom Brady, just kind
a little
of
like-
under the radar guy, and
They've really
big
clicked
success.
for a while. He's actually up for a contract, and they're not sure if New England's going to give it to him. They typically don't like giving big contracts to receivers. So
and he's a little old now too.
he is a little old, and he's got a
back then.
weird beard, so
Yeah.
that probably doesn't help. But Wes Welker's wife, who, by the way, is the picture of morality if you Google search Wes Welker's wife, just those words. It's a little hypocritical what she says. Anyway, she tweets right after the game, "Proud of my husband and the Pats." So far, sounds pretty
That's
nice.
Good wife talk so far.
However, she continues, "By the way, if anyone is bored, please go to Ray Lewis's Wikipedia page. 6 kids, 4 wives, acquitted for murder, paid a family off. Yay! What a Hall of Fame player, a true role model." She later recanted and came back and tried to apologize, but I thought that was a little out there.
I mean, there's some truth to her statements. I don't think the forum in which she did it, not a great way to go.
Right.
But to me, my lingering memory of Ray Lewis, whether he was convicted or not, is his involvement with the alleged murder, and there was something squirrely and fishy about all it. It's hard to believe that he was not at fault with
Or
that.
at least somehow involved in
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah.
Okay, so after we've talked about Ray Lewis, let's talk a little bit about the Pro Bowl. That's
Okay.
coming up this week.
Okay.
Are you going to
is.
watch it?
No.
Have you ever watched it?
No.
I have also never watched it.
I did see today that the apparently there are going to be 2 desktop computers set up, one on each sideline for players to tweet during the game.
How about that?
Interesting, right? And also they decided that the players would be allowed to tweet at halftime from their mobile devices inside the locker room. They're not allowed to have their mobile devices on the field of play. These are important things, David.
Well, I got to tell you,
Game tweets.
if anybody who's ever watched the Pro Bowl, they'll probably put more effort into those tweets than they will on the field.
It's not a game.
It's
It's
not.
stupid.
The NFL is actually meeting, and hopefully they will be deciding by next Thursday whether we even have a Pro Bowl anymore. I'm all in favor of just killing it. Get rid of it.
The best players don't want to be there. They make up injuries so they don't have to go.
The players in the Super Bowl can't be there.
Exactly. It's really the gold standard of all-star games.
Hockey.
Well, you can make an argument. I mean, for a long time it was baseball, and I think the baseball All-Star Game has lost a lot of its luster.
It has.
It has become much like the NFL Pro Bowl. It's just a show. The players really don't care.
No.
It
Whether
doesn't
you get
matter
home
that
field
much.
advantage or not, that's a
It doesn't
game.
make any difference. I will say maybe the hockey one is the most interesting at this point.
I will
don't
watch
know.
the hockey game/skills challenge
Yeah.
before I will watch anything else. And it's interesting. I TiVo that stuff.
I think the hockey players probably still care. Maybe it's because they're not so in the mainstream as these other professional athletes, and they know probably more people are watching that.
Well, and they have a
But-
skills competition that's
Yeah.
interesting. And the Pro Bowl used to do that, where they'd have like a legends game.
Yeah, it's like a punt, pass, and kick kind of thing.
Yeah.
Too, they would do. It's good stuff.
And the NHL still doing that with like the hardest slap shot,
Yeah.
quickest player around the ice, like a skills challenge.
Yeah.
The NBA kind of incorporates that. Steve Nash used to win all the like passing and dribbling in and out, but I kind of like that. I just hate what the Pro Bowl's done.
Yeah, Pro Bowl.
Not a fan.
Stupid.
All right,
Just one word.
real quick before we end this segment, what are your views quickly on the Super Bowl? I'm sure we'll talk about it next week, but from right now, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't like Ray Lewis as a person, so I'm going to be rooting for the 49ers. Just, as somebody who is trying to get behind Gus Malzahn's style of play, that kind of gives me an incentive to root for the 49ers too, see how it works in the NFL. Not exactly the same.
Right,
but,
it's a little different.
a non-traditional offense, be rooting for them too. I don't know. Honestly, I don't really care that much. You know that.
I do. I'm very interested. I'm kind of interested to see how Flacco plays. He's put up some really good numbers, but if you look, Denver's defense, really not what they once were, giving up a lot of points during the season, kind of old. Then you go to the Patriots, who are the opposite, really young all the way throughout. They've got people who should be playing wide receiver at cornerback. I mean, just absolutely terrible in the secondary. Good up front, but when he decided to pass, they couldn't do anything about it. He's going to go up and face probably, I would say, the number one defense in the NFL right now. I think he's going to get pressured a lot. Also like to see in the second half how the Ravens defense stands up against this really powerful 49ers offense. And don't forget, Kaepernick can throw the ball. He can sling it. He was recruited heavily by the Chicago Cubs to pitch in the majors. They said he could throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, but I know he can thread it down the seam. So I really think the 49ers probably – this one could be a blowout if it goes the wrong way early.
All right. We'll have more to say about it next week for sure. We've got more to say tonight, too, on the other side. Lots of interesting happenings in the SEC basketball world that's going on in full swing now. We'll be talking about that here on the other side of outputting our coverage.
It's time for SEC preview. SEC, Big 10, Big 12, 12 can't count. SEC, college football robber barons. SEC, yeah, they're big, they're fast, they're strong.
And Missouri and Texas A&M as well.
Yeah, SEC preview.
Here we go.
It's time for
All
SEC
right.
preview.
We are back here and outputting our coverage, talking SEC basketball. David, if you will, I'd like to call the past week Separation Week in the SEC. We talked last week and said there were kind of some make-or-break games for some of the teams. We're kind of waiting for somebody to step up and really assert themselves as a leader in the SEC. I think we got our answer.
I think we definitely got our answer. The big game we had talked about last week, Florida versus Missouri. Florida ranked 10th, Missouri 17th. Both of them really good records, 13-3 and 13-2 coming in. You thought this was going to be a really good battle, maybe a last-second buzzer beater. Florida dominated throughout. I mean, they started the game on a 12-0 run, never really looked back from that, scored 40 points in both halves. Just really looked dominant on the same end. Missouri couldn't score 30 in either half, so they started and they ended on defense. It was an impressive game. They were hot from three, moved the ball around really well. I think Florida's hitting it in stride. What do you think?
Do you think maybe they're peaking a little bit too early? Is this a situation where they've gotten hot at the wrong time, or do you think they can sustain this and maybe even be a legitimate title contender?
I think so. I think they've finally figured out kind of how to play in Donovan's system. He is recruited so well in his little pick and roll system. Everybody kind of fits in their spot. I think Florida's only problem is they're going to have to watch out, kind of being melancholy. You know, they've got a couple of really long breaks throughout their season. It's going to be tough to stay motivated with every game. They really kind of looked terrible against Georgia this week, the game immediately following Missouri. And stumbled in the first half and then kind of picked it up. They're going to have to make sure they bring it every quarter, but when they play right, Florida's a definite contender.
Well, let's not count out Ole Miss. Pretty much identical record to Florida, not getting the national attention that Florida is. Maybe.
Well, they haven't played the meat of their schedule yet.
Yeah, they really haven't played a whole lot of folks yet, but they're still getting it done where it counts. They got the W's. It'd be interesting to see what happens for them coming up. They play Florida on February 2nd at Florida. Right before that, they have to play Kentucky January 29th. They get that one at home, but
right.
A tough stretch coming up for them.
They do. We're really going to find out who Ole Miss is, but I really think if they keep putting up these numbers, Ole Miss is going to have a time. You're going to have a time trying to keep Ole Miss under 70.
Yeah.
So I think Ole Miss is definitely a contender. Florida. Let's talk about Alabama a little bit. Alabama with a huge win this week.
Yeah, kind of back from the dead. I think we had almost written them off a little bit, that this is going to be a down year for them, but a huge win over Kentucky this week. They really seem like they're picking up steam at this point.
Yeah, you just look up and they seem to be getting it together. A common theme in all the Alabama games, especially the SEC games, is they start behind, and they start behind by pretty big deficits. Kentucky was up like 13-5 to start this game. Alabama went 1 of 8 from 3-point, and then they just locked it down defensively, and Kentucky couldn't do anything after that. Their strength is their defense, and they're going to score off of transition points, off of rebounds and turnovers. If they don't get that, they're in trouble. They cannot win games. But Alabama's really going to have to strive on keeping opponents under 60 because their offense, especially in the half court, is just pitiful. It's not very good. So Alabama have to be clutch on defense. They're only playing with about 7, so that's going to be tough to stay physically prepared all the way throughout the season. But big win against Kentucky nonetheless.
And then on the other side of the state, Auburn. I was trying not to get too excited about Auburn basketball last week. I'm glad I didn't. A big game against Kentucky, probably the biggest game in Auburn's new arena since it's opened. Just packed out, mostly with Auburn fans, which is kind of unusual for a Kentucky game. And Auburn just laid a complete egg.
They did. They lost by almost 30.
Looked terrible. The first half tried to stay competitive, but 0 for 15 from three-point land. Just a terrible shooting night in general. They had great open looks, couldn't make a shot to save their life.
No.
Lots of turnover problems. Just a really ugly game. Losing again this week to Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt.
That one I think is the worst loss.
That's rough. I mean, obviously they're still not emotionally repaired from that loss to Kentucky, and it doesn't get any easier. This Saturday, Ole Miss coming to Auburn.
But you got to say, if they scramble and get a win against Ole Miss,
you're back in it a little bit.
You're back in it a little bit. You get a little bit of a break with Georgia, who's terrible, and then you got to hit Missouri, Alabama, Kentucky. That's tough, but a win against Ole Miss would at least boost morale.
Yeah, it's just a struggle at this point for Auburn basketball. Seemingly getting better players in. It looks like they take some steps forward, but it's still just very, very inconsistent.
Right. I want to talk about a specific day in college basketball, and this is not necessarily the SEC, but college basketball as a whole. The upset day was Tuesday. A lot of top teams fell off. Number 3 Kansas barely held on against Kansas State, winning 59-55, but Villanova beat number 5 Louisville, who had only suffered their first loss a couple weeks ago. They beat them handily, 73-64. Then you saw NC State, ranked 18th, go down to Wake Forest, unranked, 86-84. You had a bunch of losses. Duke lost 2 nights ago to Miami by almost 30. It was the 3rd biggest loss by an AP number 1 team ever. They lost by 27 points. Miami was taunting them during the game. They were slapping the court, which was made famous by the Duke defenders. And they made them look ugly. Is there a top contender in the country right now?
It's tough to say. I mean, basketball has so much parity in it this year that there's really not a top team. But I think in basketball it's dangerous to read too much into 1, 2, or even 3 games. I mean, there's just so many games they play over the season. Basketball is such a back and forth game. It's not necessarily like football where 9 times out of 10 the better team is probably going to win. I think that number is a lot less in basketball.
Definitely.
So
you have a lot less players. If you can get a star player, he can make your team. He can cover up some holes.
So I don't know. I mean,
Do you think the reason we have more parity nowadays is because of the one and done?
Yes, this is interesting. They got Charles Barkley on the game, the Auburn-Kentucky game. They were interviewing him about this exact subject, and he said he hates it. He hates the one and done rule.
Well, of course he does. He's old school.
Yeah.
It's better than the system where freshmen couldn't play.
Yeah, I think it's better than that. Personally, I would almost rather that they didn't have a rule requiring players to be at least 1 year out of high school before drafted into the NBA. That way, those guys, I have no problem with them going straight into it. If they're ready,
right,
go for it. Don't pollute the college game.
Which is how we got people like Kevin Garnett.
Right. Yeah. Kobe Bryant went straight to the NBA. LeBron James. I mean, it works for some guys, and maybe the intent is to protect some of the guys on the borderline that they think they're ready, but they're really not.
At that point, that's their problem. I mean, the NBA only drafts like 36 players and 120 come out. I mean, you got to do your numbers.
You're really hurting the game, though, with this rule, and it's really hard for teams to develop the kind of veteran leadership that they need to really be dominant.
Definitely.
And to me, it makes it a lot less interesting to watch.
It can be, but it makes March more interesting because then you pit these one-and-dones who are up in the 7th and 8th in the country against these teams like maybe a Washington State or a Butler where you have seniors on your squad. Butler, by the way, losing on Wednesday, same night as Duke, to LaSalle. That's a pretty big loss. They were as high as number 9 in the country. So
yeah, it's just hard for anyone to sustain any kind of consistency these days.
Well, we're going to make our crazy wild predictions of the week. Who is going to win the NCAA championship right now?
Right now. If I had to choose a team to win,
one team.
This is just kind of a shot in the dark.
It is. It's a crazy question to ask.
Maybe Louisville.
Maybe Louisville. Is this their year?
Maybe it's their year.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I really have not watched enough of the top teams. And this is my problem with March Madness. I really don't pay attention to teams outside the SEC until you get there.
Right.
You know?
I think I would put my money on Kansas. They are not nearly as skilled as they have been in years past, but they're playing a different game. You got to give their coach a lot of credit. They've slowed the game down. They've really focused on defense. They're pretty stifling there, but they're not going to put up a ton of points. But this team has been down and right on the wire in almost every one of their games, and they consistently find a way to win it. And those are the kind of annoying, nitpicky teams that really have attention to detail, play good defense. I think they have a chance in the March. So we'll see. That was our crazy wild pick of the week.
All right, mark it down. They will most certainly be wrong.
Definitely.
We're going to take another quick break here. On the other side, got some baseball news to talk about. Some interesting happenings this week on the trade front. A couple of legendary baseball players passing away, players and coaches passing away this past week. We'll talk about that stuff on the other side. College football news and notes headed your way as well, so stick around on Outputting Our Coverage. We'll be right back.
We're back, don't know what we're talking about. 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 We're back, here we go. No more commercials. Here we go. Always talking stuff. We're back, don't know what we're talking about, but we're back. Time for the show. We're back, here we go.
All right, we are back here on Outputting Our Coverage. Big news on the trade front in baseball as of yesterday. Atlanta Braves adding a big-name player, but losing some key pieces in the process.
I think so. They lost a couple key pieces. I think people are overstating how key they were. Martin Prado, definitely the big-name headline that left, traded to the Arizona Diamondbacks. Utility player all around. Everybody kind of thought that he was the most obvious successor to Chipper Jones at third base. He's gone. He's with the Diamondbacks. But really, Prado had some injury troubles the last couple years, really not producing like he did when he first burst on the scene. So I don't see that as such a bad loss. Then they traded Randall Delgado, which was another name a lot of people might have known. A reliever, not really that great. 4.9 record coming out of the pen with about a 4 ERA. So serviceable, but not anything spectacular. And what they get in return has potential anyway to be a really big boom to their offense.
Yeah, you got a pair of brother teammates.
That's right.
Kind of rare in sports, I guess.
Justin and B.J. Upton.
Yeah.
And playing next to each other. One's in center, one's in left.
Yeah.
So,
obviously, you get a lot of speed. You get some power as well. Are you losing some, I don't know what the right word is, glue guys a little bit and replacing them with, big names, but maybe you're now missing a key piece or something?
I don't think so. I think the Braves' problem last year was that they had too many glue guys. I mean, they very easily could get a runner on first and second and then leave them. And they had multiple times where they were leaving bases loaded in the middle of big games with no outs, and they couldn't score or put a run across. So you've really seen the Braves go after power in the last couple years. The first one was with Dan Uggla. He hasn't really panned out, hadn't been what they thought he'd be. But with Jason Hayward, Freddie Freeman, really big power guys. McCann is more of an in-the-gaps hitter, but he's hurt too much. So they went after these Upton kids who were hitting 28 homers a year, hoping that they're really going to be able to drive in some of the runs. So I think it's a big risk, but it has the potential for a big payout.
Yeah, so certainly I would say probably the biggest off-season news as far as players moving around in baseball thus far this year.
Oh, definitely.
Still plenty of time on the hot stove for things to come, but really the free agent class this year is not what it's been in past years. You don't have a Pujols or somebody of that ilk looking to move.
You don't. You're really kind of having to scrounge around for some players. Lance Berkman went to Texas, which it was infamous that he kind of dogged the Texas Rangers a couple years ago, and now he's playing for them. So he had to clear that up with his first interview.
Yeah, well, I appreciate as a Cardinals fan what Lance Berkman did, but he was having multiple injury problems pretty much from the time he started with St. Louis. He's very old. He is. I'm not that upset to see him go.
No. So now we had a couple big losses from the Major League Baseball community. You want to talk about our first one? He's kind of close to your heart.
Stan Musial, the most famous Cardinal of all, passing away this week. Really kind of an underrated player of his time. I mean, if you look at his statistics, they match up with Willie Mays and pretty much Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio, all those guys. Very similar statistics.
An amazing hitter.
But playing in the Midwest and kind of his personality the way it was, it never quite got the publicity. And I think that's really kind of the way that he wanted it.
Right.
Living in St. Louis for a short time as I did, my parents lived there for much longer. Everyone in St. Louis has a Stan Musial story.
Definitely. Of
where they have run into him and met him. Always a guy that would pretty much drop whatever he was doing to talk with you, sign an autograph, really seemed to take an interest in you as a person, and just kind of a rare thing for a professional athlete, even in those days, to be that approachable. And of course, a guy that played his whole career in one place, that's kind of rare as well. I think some people were kind of expecting Albert Pujols to fill that kind of role, but we saw the way that story ended, kind of ugly in St. Louis, I guess. So.
But you can kind of see how Albert Pujols, what respect he had for Stan Musial.
Absolutely.
When they were promoting Albert Pujols in Anaheim, they were putting up billboards that just had his face and 2 words, and it was Spanish for the man. And he made them take it down and replace the words because he said the only man is Stan the man.
Yeah. So certainly a devastating loss for the Cardinals community, but someone who will be fondly remembered by, I think, everyone associated with baseball.
I think so. The other passing was Earl Weaver, a guy a little close to my heart. He was really one of the first baseball managers to use any form of statistics and player matchups to kind of guide his lineup, and was a great Hall of Fame manager, just continually getting to division and pennant games, and eventually winning 1 World Series. But I think more than that, more than his mind, more than his matchups and his player personnel, was the way that he interacted with umpires.
Kind of a trendsetter.
If you have never seen one of these clips, please go type in Earl Weaver. Make sure your safe search is on YouTube. They're not the most clean conversations you'll ever hear, but definitely worth listening to. He would get after it. He took a base off the field with him. he covered up the plate with dirt. Always pretty funny. Back when you could actually touch the umpires and not get suspended. So Earl Weaver passed. Kind of odd. He was on an Oriole fan cruise ship when he passed and had a heart attack and passed. So, he went with all of his biggest fans.
Yeah. So some big losses to the baseball community this week. Baseball season not that far away now, I guess.
About a month.
It's January, and pitchers and catchers will be reporting shortly. Spring training will be getting going, and we'll be back right again for the long 170-game season where I will lose interest about a month in.
Let me ask you that. Are you going to watch this year?
I'll do what I always do. I know how this is going to go. I'll get excited at the beginning of the year. I'll try to watch some games.
Play a little fantasy baseball.
I'll try, and then, a couple months in, it just kind of drags.
Yeah.
I just kind of stop paying attention. Then I'll sort of get interested again, maybe mid-August when you're starting to get into playoff time.
Right.
I'll start following it again, but it's just so difficult for me to stay into it throughout that entire summer.
It's a long season, but I really enjoy the playoffs. I don't think there's a whole lot better TV than baseball playoffs. I wrote an article about it a little while ago about how you don't really get the entire game from the TV broadcast and how there are the little intricacies and the things that are missed not being there. But still, the atmosphere, the one-run games, the pregnant pause in between pitches when it really gets crunch time, you can't beat it. I mean, the tension is definitely there, especially when the Cardinals made their run 2 years ago. That might have been one of the more interesting World Series I'd watched in a while. So baseball's still good. We're past the long ball era. I don't think that's ever coming back. We're more in the nickel and dime and play for every run. And to be honest with you, I really like that kind of baseball.
Yeah,
I think it makes it interesting.
I just don't understand the logic behind such a long season. I mean, you're not going to lose anything out of the playoffs if you shorten it a little bit.
I think you're asking for people to dope up when you make a season like that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just the way it's always been, and probably the way it always will be.
Oh, well.
All right, we're going to take another quick break. Don't worry, we're going to talk college football on this show. We're going to do it on the other side of the break. Having to scrounge a little bit this week, but there are some news and notes to discuss. So we will do that on the other side here of Outputting Our Coverage.
I'm alright, nobody but about me. Why you got to give me a fight? Can't you just let it be? I'm alright, don't nobody but about me.
Alright, we're back. You're now Outputting Our Coverage. Not a whole lot going on in the world of college football this week, comparatively.
Right.
We still got some Manti Te'o stuff floating around. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, let's talk about the NCAA. Everyone's favorite punching bag, I guess. A couple of interesting things going on with the NCAA, one of which we may have discussed before. I'm getting old, I can't remember. Some NCAA rule changes that happened, I believe, maybe last week, that now allow for unlimited text messages, internet communications, Facebook messages, all that stuff from coaches to recruits. Are you in favor?
No. I think if the social media is there, let them use it. Especially considering most coaches are old, they're probably not going to know how to use it.
Yeah, but the reason this came into existence, this was a so-called Saban rule, limiting the number of text messages and things of that nature to recruits to try to help them maintain some sort of normal life. Those restrictions are now gone.
I'm sorry. Once you're being recruited heavily, and if you're a high recruit, you don't have a normal life.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's gone.
Yeah, I think you can try to police it as much as you want, but I think really what ended up happening is lawyers at the NCAA were spending all their time perusing text message records, and that's a little bit ridiculous.
Right.
When you get right down to it. So certainly an interesting change there. Other big news with NCAA this week, Miami investigation botched in a nutshell.
Terribly. Miami, when all the reports came out, it was just kind of astounding what all Miami had done. You were really thinking the death penalty might be in order?
Yeah, I mean, let me sum it up for you in a single sentence. A booster paid for an abortion for a woman that a football player slept with. Continue.
That's all you need right there.
Yes.
That was it. But apparently Miami might get off a little bit. I found this neat Q&A. You can look at it at sbnation.com if you type in NCAA investigation. Really explains it pretty well if you want to read the whole thing, but I'm just going to read a snippet out of it. The question is, so what did the NCAA enforcement staff do? And the answer is the NCAA enforcement staff worked with Nevin Shapiro's attorney, which is the booster in
Right.
question.
He's the bad guy.
They worked with his attorney to depose witnesses with questions that were not related to his bankruptcy case, but were related to the NCAA's investigation of Miami. So they worked with this lawyer, and under the false pretense of a bankruptcy case, illegally obtained the information about all of these findings. The NCAA, as much of rule sticklers as they are, love to ignore their rules and apparently the country's rules of how to garner information.
Yeah, I mean, really, some of the NCAA investigations have just been laughable. The kind of evidence that's brought into these NCAA hearings would be laughed out of the legitimate courtroom. To me, the interesting thing about this is some of the other programs that have gotten hit, like USC, Penn State, maybe not as good of an example. If I were them, I'd be pretty pissed right now.
Oh, yeah,
Because
definitely.
some of this stuff happened in their investigations as well, and they still got hammered.
Okay, now what I don't understand is going to happen, and I'm not sure, I haven't heard any word, but I think this will be interesting to look at. Missouri's current basketball coach
Frank Haith, yes.
was the coach at Miami. And there was a story 2 days ago that he was under investigation, and they were just about ready to lay down the law, give him some penalties, maybe even suspend him for a little while. I don't know. That was before all this came out. What happens to him now? Does the whole case get dropped?
It may. I mean, it may have saved him. It's really tough to say. I mean, this kind of thing has never happened before, and certainly you don't want to convict someone under false pretenses because that sets a terrible precedent. But at the same time, you can't let people like Miami get away with what they got away with.
Right.
Either. You know, it's really, they've really screwed themselves. They're in a big catch-22, and I don't really know that there's a lot that they can do. I think at this point there probably won't be that harsh of sanctions.
There won't. I just think that the NCAA, they've gone about this wrong for the last 10 years. They keep overstepping their bounds. They try to over-police where it's not their jurisdiction. A lot of stuff they do is questionable. I think the worst thing that they do is there's no written list of, if you do this, this is the punishment. If you do this, this is the punishment. It's wild and random. The NFL doesn't have a written list, but they're pretty specific about, if you do this, you're probably going to get $30,000 or $10,000, depending on the severity. With the NCAA, it just makes them look like they're making it up as they go.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think they are.
It seems like at times the NCAA has outlived its usefulness. You have to wonder. I still think this is going to happen at some point. The major conferences are going to jump out of the NCAA. Really, the NCAA does not provide any useful service as far as money making goes for these conferences now. So at some point, there's not going to be any incentive left for them to stay involved. They're going to break out and do their own thing.
I think that sounds good, but I remember about 7 years ago when we were still in high school, being on a radio show called The Sideline Swamp with a guy named Fred White, who said the same thing, and he thought it was going to happen in a year. Really still hasn't happened. I think there's probably still the potential of that, but I don't know that we'll see it in our lifetime. I just think there's enough money to be had. Once the money starts to slide, and the NCAA maybe takes that too big a piece of the pie, I think maybe you could see it there, but not until the money starts going away. There's a lot to be had right now.
All right. Let's talk Manti Te'o. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
Remember what happened with him? Wasn't that weird?
Right. And it just gets weirder. There was a report yesterday that the voice that Manti Te'o was talking to over the phone. Now, remember, Manti, for those of you who apparently have lived under a rock for the last 3 weeks, Manti Te'o had a girlfriend, but then didn't. Apparently never existed. Just a made-up figment. You want to attempt this name because I'm terrible at it?
Okay, the name of the girlfriend.
No, the guy who did the hoax.
Guy. Okay, it's Ronaya Tuiasosopo.
Right.
Let's go with that.
That guy apparently was behind the hoax. He now is a lawyer. His lawyer yesterday came out and said that the voice that was talking to Manti Te'o all throughout this entire hoax, a year and a half, depending on which report you read, was, say the name again.
The same guy.
Yeah, Ronaya
Tuiasosopo.
It was a man disguising his voice. That's what he said. It was reported on ESPN. It was written down. It's on a recording. That's what the lawyer for this guy said. But today's a different day.
It's a different story.
It's a different story.
Yeah.
Relatives of Tino Tuiasosopo, a woman in her mid-20s.
Are you sure that's not a typo? Could it be a man in his Tino? That's a man's name, right? Tino Martinez?
Yeah, but in the next sentence it says Tino is the girl that Manti has been talking with all these
David,
months.
we can't take anything as fact at this point.
We can't.
Don't know.
I don't know. But I would assume...
Okay, she's an alleged female.
Alleged female was apparently the voice. I don't know. We're never going to know what this is. This is a soap opera. It just gets more and more confusing.
Do we care? Do we need resolution on this?
I don't care, but I think Manti Te'o cares. I think NFL teams looking into Manti Te'o care. Was he a conspirator, a part of this hoax? Did he manipulate it, or was he somebody who just got gypped, got catfished?
I don't know. Honestly, the more and more I read about this, the more I think that Manti Te'o is just a moron.
I agree, and I think
he legitimately got duped. I think he's stupid.
Right. If you want to look for evidence that Manti Te'o is a moron, I refer you back to YouTube and just go back and look at 3. You can pick them at random, but 3 post-game interviews with Manti Te'o.
Yeah.
I think that'll prove your point.
Yeah, he ain't the sharpest tool in the shed.
He is not. He plays football good,
and a lot of football players aren't.
They're not.
But one thing I think we can say with certainty. I still maintain that this would never happen in an SEC school.
Right.
There's just too much goodness with women there for this to happen. Notre Dame, apparently a very scary collection of women to date there.
Definitely. I also think that, in an SEC school, you still do have people who are not very smart, going back to that. And if you want evidence of that, go back and look at when Alabama won their national championship and look at Upshaw's speech. Yeah. Right after that. That was pretty terrible.
I mean, I remember with Auburn, Nick Fairley,
Mike
Dyer. I mean, those guys, they don't need to be talking into a microphone.
No, they don't need to be talking ever.
Yeah, I mean, for every Barrett Jones, you're going to have 1,000 Mike Tysons. Well, maybe not even Mike. Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson was over the age, right?
I mean,
except when he's talking about eating somebody's babies.
Yeah, that's weird.
That was
weird.
You can't do that.
You can't do that. That's weird. So, all right. That's all the time we got.
We had Mike Tyson on the show. That was pretty... I didn't expect that when we started.
Fighting Mike Tyson.
I'm telling you.
Iron Mike? What was his nickname?
Iron Mike.
Iron Mike Tyson. Yeah. He was in that video game. Did you ever have that?
I did.
Yeah.
I could...
Punch-Out. It was fun. You just had to...
Dodge to the left.
Right.
Dodge to the left. Uppercut.
Yeah. That was good times. I never had that game, but I had friends who did. That's the way to do it.
That's right.
That's how you go. All right. That's all the time we got on Outputting our coverage this week. There will probably be some kind of crazy news for us to talk about next week since there's not a whole lot of actual game action going on. We'll have a Super Bowl preview. We'll let you know just enough to where you can not look like an idiot at your Super Bowl party, mostly for myself. But until then, keep calm and hurry up, as I saw this week for the Gus Malzahn offense. I thought that was interesting.
I like it. Good motto.
We'll be back next week on Outputting our coverage.